Moby Dick by Herman Melville. Chapter 111, The Pacific. As we glided past the Bashy Islands, we finally entered the vast South Sea. If it weren't for everything else, I would have greeted my beloved Pacific Ocean with endless gratitude, for the long prayers of my youth had been answered. That calm ocean stretched eastward before me, 1,000 leagues of blue. There's an indescribable sweetness to this sea, whose gentle yet powerful movements seem to suggest a hidden soul beneath the surface, much like the legendary ripples over the grave of the Apostle John in Ephesus. It seems only fitting that the waves over these vast ocean pastures, wide and rolling like watery prairies and the burial grounds of all four continents, should rise and fall, ebb and flow without end. Here, countless shades and shadows, drowned dreams, sleepwalkers, and daydreamers, all that we call lives and souls, lie dreaming still, tossed like sleepers in their beds, the ever-rolling waves stirred by their restlessness. For any reflective traveler, this calm Pacific, once seen, will always become his cherished sea. It holds the central waters of the world, with the Indian and Atlantic Oceans merely as its arms. The same waves wash over the newly established Californian towns, planted just yesterday by the latest generation of people, while they caress the faded yet still beautiful shores of Asian lands older than Abraham. In between, countless coral islands and endless, unknown archipelagos float, along with impenetrable Japans. Thus, this mysterious and divine Pacific surrounds the entire world, making all coasts one continuous bay. It seems to be the heart of the earth, beating with the tides. Rising with those eternal swells, you cannot help but acknowledge its allure, bowing your head in reverence to the sea. But thoughts of Pan hardly crossed Ahab's mind as he stood like an iron statue in his usual spot beside the mizzen rigging. He absent-mindedly inhaled the sweet musk from the Bashy Islands, where gentle lovers must surely be walking, with one nostril, while deliberately breathing in the salty air of the newly discovered sea with the other. The very sea where the despised white whale must be swimming. Now, finally navigating these nearly final waters, heading toward the Japanese hunting grounds, Ahab's determination sharpened. His lips pressed together tightly like a vice. The veins on his forehead bulged like overflowing streams. Even in his sleep, his cry echoed through the ship's hull. "Steady, everyone! The white whale is spouting thick blood!" Chapter 112. The Blacksmith. Taking advantage of the mild, cool summer weather that was now present in these latitudes and preparing for the particularly active work soon to come, Perth, the dirty, blistered old blacksmith, left his portable forge on deck after finishing his work on Ahab's leg. He didn't move it back into the hold, as it was frequently called upon by the headsmen, harpooneers, and bowsmen to do small jobs for them, whether it was altering, repairing, or reshaping their various weapons and boat equipment. Often he was surrounded by an eager crowd waiting for his service, holding boat spades, pike heads, harpoons, and lances, closely watching every sooty move he made as he worked. Yet this old man wielded his hammer with patience, using a steady hand. He showed no signs of complaint, impatience, or irritability. Silent, slow, and serious, he bent over his chronically hunched back, working as if the act of labor was his very life, and the heavy pounding of his hammer echoed the heavy beating of his heart. And so it was, truly miserable. The old man had a peculiar way of walking, a slight but painful limp that had sparked the curiosity of the sailors early in the voyage. After persistent questioning, he finally revealed the shameful story of his tragic fate. On a cold winter midnight, while walking between two towns, the blacksmith felt a deadly numbness creeping over him and sought refuge in a leaning, dilapidated barn. The result of this was the loss of both feet. This event marked the start of a long series of misfortunes in his life. At nearly 60 years old, he encountered the ruin that sorrow brings. He had been a skilled artisan with plenty of work, owned a house and garden, and enjoyed a loving wife who was like a daughter to him, along with 3 cheerful, healthy children. Every Sunday, they attended a cheerful church set in a grove. But one night, under the cover of darkness and disguised in a cunning way, a desperate burglar entered their happy home and stole everything from them. To make matters worse, the blacksmith unknowingly allowed this burglar into his family's life. It was the bottle conjurer. When he opened that fateful bottle, the fiend emerged and destroyed his home. The blacksmith's shop was in the basement of his house, with a separate entrance. His loving, healthy wife would listen happily, without worry, to the sound of her husband's hammer ringing out. The muffled sounds traveled through the floors and walls to her in the nursery, where they would lull their children to sleep. Oh, the pain of it all. Oh, death, why can't you be timely? If you had taken this old blacksmith before his full ruin, then the young widow would have had a bittersweet grief, and her orphans would have a truly noble, legendary father to remember. They would have had the financial security to care for them. But instead, death took away some virtuous elder brother, whose daily labor supported another family, leaving the old man useless and suffering until life's rot made him easier to collect. Why go on? Each day, the sound of his hammer grew fainter. His wife sat frozen at the window, tearless, gazing into the sorrowful faces of her children. The bellows fell silent. The forge choked with cinders. The house was sold. The mother sank into the long grass of the churchyard. Her children followed her there twice, and the homeless, familyless old man wandered off alone, mourning, with a gray head that was a mockery of youthful beauty. Death seems to be the only desirable end for a life like this, but death is merely a passage into the unknown, a first greeting to the possibilities of the immense, wild, watery, and uncharted. Thus, to the eyes longing for death, who still possess a reluctance to take their own life, the all-embracing ocean alluringly spreads out its vast expanse of unimaginable terrors and wonderful new adventures. From the depths of the infinite Pacific, 1,000 mermaids call to them, saying, "Come here, broken-hearted souls. Here is another life free from the guilt of death. Here are supernatural wonders without having to die for them. Come, bury yourself in a life that is more oblivious than death to your now equally hated and hating world. Come, set up your gravestone in the churchyard, then come here until we marry you." Listening to these voices east and west at sunrise and sunset, the blacksmith's soul responded, "Yes, I'm coming." And so Perth set off to go whaling. Chapter 113, The Forge. With his matted beard and wearing a bristly sharkskin apron, Perth was standing between his forge and anvil around midday. He held a pikehead in the coals with one hand while managing the forge with the other when Captain Ahab approached, carrying a small, rusty leather bag. As he drew closer to the forge, moody Ahab paused. Eventually, Perth withdrew his iron from the fire and began hammering it on the anvil, sending off thick sparks that hovered around, some flying near Ahab. "Are these your Mother Carey's chickens, Perth? They're always following you. Good omens too, but not for everyone. Look, they're burning, yet you're untouched by the heat." "Because I'm already burned all over, Captain Ahab," Perth replied, pausing for a moment with his hammer. "I'm past being burned. You can't easily scorch a scar." Well, well, no more of that. Your shriveled voice sounds too calmly woeful to me. I'm not in paradise myself, so I can't stand the misery in others that isn't madness. You should go mad, blacksmith. Why don't you? How can you endure without going mad? Does heaven still hate you so much that you can't go mad? What are you making there? "I'm welding an old pikehead, sir. It had some seams and dents. And can you make it smooth again after such hard use?" "I think so, sir. And I suppose you can smooth out almost any seams and dents, no matter how tough the metal?" "Yes, sir. I think I can. All seams and dents but one." "Look here," Ahab said passionately as he leaned on Perth's shoulders. "Can you smooth out a seam like this?" He gestured to the ridges on his forehead. "If you could, blacksmith, I'd gladly lay my head on your anvil and feel your heaviest hammer strike between my eyes. Can you smooth this seam?" "Oh, that's the one, sir. Didn't I say all seams and dents but one?" "Yes, blacksmith, it is the one. It's unsmoothable. Though you only see it here on my flesh, it has worked down into the bone of my skull. That is all wrinkles. But enough of this childish talk. No more gaffs and pikes today. Look here." He jingled the leather bag as if it were filled with gold coins. "I want a harpoon made, one that 1,000 fiends couldn't break, something that will stick in a whale like its own fin bone. Here's the material." He tossed the pouch onto the anvil. "Look, blacksmith, these are the leftover nails from racing horses' steel shoes." "Horseshoe nails, sir?" "Captain Ahab, you have the best and toughest material we blacksmiths work with." "I know it, old man. These nails will weld together like glue made from melted bones. Hurry, Forge me the harpoon. Start with 12 rods for the shank, then twist, wind, and hammer these 12 together like strands of a tow line. Quick, I'll tend to the fire." Once the 12 rods were made, Ahab tested them one by one, spiraling each around a heavy iron bolt. "A flaw," he said, rejecting the last one. "Work that over again, Perth." After that was done, Perth was about to begin welding the 12 rods into one when Ahab stopped him, saying he would weld his own iron. As Ahab hammered away, panting and gasping, Perth passed him the glowing rods one by one, while the forge sent up a fierce flame. The Parsee watched silently, bowing his head towards the fire as if invoking some curse or blessing upon the work. But when Ahab looked up, the Parsee slid away. "What's that bunch of odd characters doing over there?" muttered Stubb, watching from the forecastle. "That Parsee smells fire like a fuse and smells like a hot musket's powder pan." At last, the shank received its final heat. When Perth plunged it into the nearby water barrel to temper it, the hissing steam shot up into Ahab's bent face. "Are you trying to brand me, Perth?" He winced for a moment from the pain. "Have I been forging my own branding iron, then?" "Pray God, not that. Yet I fear something, Captain Ahab. Is this harpoon not for the white whale? For the white fiend? But now for the barbs. You must make those yourself. Here are my razors, the best steel. Sharpen the barbs as finely as the needle-like sleet of the icy sea." For a moment, the old blacksmith looked at the razors as if he didn't want to use them. "Take them, man. I have no use for them. I neither shave, eat, nor pray until. But here, let's get to work." Finally, shaped into a sharp point and welded to the shank, the steel end of the harpoon was nearly ready. Just as Perth was about to give the barbs their final heat, he asked Ahab to bring the water cask near. No water for that. I want it of the true death temper." "Hey, tashtego, queequegged, degu, what do you say, pagans? Will you give me enough blood to cover this barb?" He held it up high. A cluster of dark nods replied with a yes. 3 punctures were made in their heathen flesh, and the barbs of the white whale were tempered. "I don't baptize you in the name of the Father, but in the name of the devil." Ahab howled deliriously as the heated iron greedily consumed the baptismal blood. Now gathering spare poles from below, he selected one of hickory, still covered in bark, and fitted its end into the iron socket. He unwound a coil of new tow line and stretched some of it to the windlass, applying great tension. Pressing his foot down until the rope hummed like a harp string, he eagerly leaned over it, checking for strandings. "Good. Now for the seizings." At one end, the rope was unstranded, and the individual yarns were braided and woven around the socket of the harpoon. The pole was then firmly driven into the socket. The rope was traced halfway along the pole's length and secured tightly with twine. Once finished, the pole, iron, and rope, like the 3 fates, remained inseparable. Ahab moodily stalked away with the weapon, the sound of his ivory leg and the hickory pole ringing hollowly along the deck. But before he entered his cabin, he heard a light, unnatural, half-mocking, yet pitiful sound. "Oh, Pip, your wretched laugh, your aimless but restless eye, all your strange antics intertwined meaningfully with the black tragedy of the sorrowful ship, and mocked it." Chapter 114, The Gilder. As the Pequod ventured deeper into the heart of the Japanese whaling grounds, it was soon bustling with activity. Often, in mild, pleasant weather, they spent 12, 15, 18, or even 20 hours on the water, pulling, sailing, or paddling after whales, or waiting calmly for 60 or 70 minutes for them to surface, though their efforts often yielded little success. During these moments, with the sun softened, floating all day on gentle swells, seated in his boat, light as a birch canoe, blending so seamlessly with the soft waves that they seemed to purr against the sides of the boat like content cats. These were the times of peaceful tranquility, when, admiring the serene beauty of the ocean's surface, one might forget the fierce heart that beats beneath it and would not want to remember that this soft facade hides a merciless tooth. These are the times when the whaler feels a certain childlike, confident connection to the sea. He views it as a patch of blooming earth. A distant ship showing only the tops of its masts seems to move not through high waves but through tall grass in a rolling prairie, just as the horses of Western settlers only show their upright ears while their bodies wade through the thick greenery. The long, untouched valleys and the gentle blue hills carry a hush and a hum. You could almost believe that tired children are sleeping in these quiet spaces during a joyful May when the flowers are picked. All of this intertwines with your most mystical thoughts, blending fact and imagination into one seamless experience. Such calming scenes, however brief, had at least a temporary effect on Ahab. Even if these golden moments opened hidden treasures within him, his breath on them only tarnished their shine. O grassy meadows, O evergreen, endless landscapes in the soul. In you, though long parched by the dry spell of earthly life, men can still roll like young horses in fresh morning clover, and for a few fleeting moments feel the cool dew of eternal life upon them. If only these blessed calms could last. But life's intertwined threads are woven together. Calms interrupted by storms, a storm for every calm. There's no steady progress in this life. We don't advance in fixed steps and then pause at the end. We pass through the unconscious innocence of childhood, the blind faith of boyhood, the doubts of adolescence, the common fate, then skepticism, then disbelief, ultimately resting in the contemplative state of adulthood that wonders if. Yet once we've gone through all this, we find ourselves tracing the cycle again. We become infants, boys, and men, filled with ifs forever. Where is the final harbor from which we will never set sail again? In what rapt ether does the world sail, where even the most weary never tire? Where is the hidden father of the foundling? Our souls are like orphans whose unmarried mothers die giving birth to them. The secret of our origins lies in their graves, and we must go there to discover it. That same day, gazing deep into the golden sea from the side of his boat, Starbuck quietly murmured, "Beauty beyond measure, just like what any lover sees in his young bride's eye. Don't tell me about your toothy sharks and your cannibal ways. Let faith replace fact. Let imagination replace memory. I look deep down and truly believe." And Stubb, like a fish sparkling in the same golden light, leaped up. I'm Stubb, and Stubb has his own story, but here I swear that Stubb has always been cheerful. Chapter 115. The Pequod meets the Bachelor. A few weeks after Ahab's harpoon was completed, the sights and sounds that came rushing in on the wind were quite cheerful. It was a Nantucket ship called the Bachelor, which had just secured its last barrel of oil and closed its hatches, now happily sailing among the widely spaced ships, dressed in festive decorations as it prepared to head home. The three men at her masthead wore long ribbons of narrow red fabric on their hats. A whaleboat was hanging upside down from the stern, and from the bowsprit dangled the lower jaw of the last whale they had caught. Colorful flags and signals of all kinds were flying from her rigging. 2 barrels of sperm oil were lashed sideways in each of her 3 basketed tops. Above them, slender containers of the same precious oil were perched in the cross trees, and a brass lamp was fixed to her main truck. Later, it was discovered that the Bachelor had enjoyed incredible success, especially surprising since many other ships had spent months in the same waters without catching a single whale. They had given away barrels of beef and bread to make room for the much more valuable sperm oil, and had even traded for extra barrels from the ships they encountered. These were packed along the deck and in the captain's and officers' quarters. The cabin table itself had been smashed into kindling wood, and the crew dined off the broad top of an oil barrel secured to the floor as a centerpiece. In the forecastle, the sailors had caulked and sealed their chests and filled them. Humorously, it was said that the cook had fitted a lid on his largest pot and filled it. The steward had plugged his spare coffee pot and filled that too. And the harpooneers had capped the ends of their harpoons and filled them as well. Everything was filled with sperm oil, except for the captain's pants pockets, which he kept empty for his hands as a sign of his complete satisfaction. As this happy, lucky ship approached the moody Pequod, the loud sound of enormous drums echoed from her forecastle. Drawing closer, a crowd of her crew could be seen gathered around her massive trypots, which, covered with the tough skin of the black fish, roared loudly with every clap of the crew's hands. On the quarterdeck, the mates and harpooneers were dancing with the olive-skinned women who had run away with them from the Polynesian islands, while suspended in an ornate boat between the foremast and mainmast, 3 black men from Long Island, played lively jigs with bows made from whale ivory. Meanwhile, others from the ship's crew were busily tearing apart the try-works, from which the huge pots had been removed. It was so chaotic that it seemed they were tearing down the infamous Bastille, raising wild shouts as they threw the now useless bricks and mortar into the sea. Standing above it all, the captain observed from the elevated quarterdeck, watching the entire joyful scene unfold as if it were all for his amusement. Ahab, on his own quarterdeck, was dark and brooding. As the two ships crossed paths, one full of joy for its past, the other filled with dread for the future, their two captains embodied the stark contrast of the moment. Come aboard, called the cheerful captain of the Bachelor, raising a glass and a bottle in the air. Have you seen the white whale? Ahab grunted in reply. No, I've only heard of him, but I don't believe in him at all, the other replied cheerfully. Come aboard. You're too damn cheerful. Sail on. Did you lose any men? Ahab asked. Not enough to matter. Just 2 islanders, that's all. But come aboard, my hearty. I'll soon take that frown off your face. Come on, it's a celebration. A full ship heading home. How strangely familiar is a fool, Ahab muttered. Then, aloud, he said, You say you're a full ship and homeward bound? Well then, call me an empty ship heading out. You go your way, and I'll go mine. Forward, set all sail, and keep her to the wind. And so, while one ship sailed cheerfully before the breeze, the other stubbornly fought against it. The 2 vessels parted ways, with the crew of the Pequod casting grave, lingering looks at the departing Bachelor, while the Bachelor's crew ignored their stares, caught up in their lively celebrations. As Ahab leaned over the taffrail, watching the ship head home, he took a small vial of sand from his pocket. Looking from the ship to the vial, it seemed he was connecting 2 distant memories, for that vial was filled with soundings from Nantucket. Chapter 116. The Dying Whale. Often in life, when fortune smiles upon those around us, we might feel a rush of good luck, even if we seem to be failing before. This was the case with the Pequod. The day after encountering the cheerful Bachelor, they spotted whales and managed to kill 4 of them, one of which was slain by Ahab. It was late in the afternoon. After all the excitement of the hunt was over, the sun and the whale drifted peacefully in the beautiful sunset sea and sky, dying together in silence. In that moment, there was such sweetness and sadness, such heartfelt prayers rising in that rosy air, that it almost felt as if the warm breeze from the distant green valleys of the Manila Islands had come to sea, bringing with it the evening hymns. Ahab, feeling soothed but only sinking into a deeper gloom, had pulled away from the whale and sat intently watching it fade from the now calm boat. He noticed the peculiar way all sperm whales die. They turn their heads toward the sun as they expire. And this strange sight, witnessed on such a peaceful evening, conveyed a sense of wonder to Ahab that he hadn't felt before. He turns and turns toward it, so slowly, yet so steadily, with his brow paying homage in his last moments. He, too, worships fire, a faithful and noble servant of the sun. Oh, how I wish these 2 favorable eyes had never seen such a sight. Look, here in these serene, untouched waters, far removed from the troubles of humanity, where there are no rocks to record our history, where for countless ages the waves have rolled on in silence like the stars above the Niger's unknown source. Here, life too dies, turning toward the sun in faith. But see, no sooner is it dead than death spins around the body, sending it in another direction. Oh, dark half of nature, you who have built your throne from the bones of the drowned somewhere in the heart of these barren seas. You are an infidel, and you speak too clearly to me in the fierce typhoon and in the calm that follows. This whale, too, has turned its dying head toward the sun and then moved away again, carrying a lesson for me. Oh, powerful, mighty creature! Oh, high-flying, rainbowed jet! You strive for something, while this one jets away in vain. In vain, O whale, do you seek to connect with the all-giving sun, which only brings life but does not restore it. Yet, darker half, you rock me with a prouder, albeit darker faith. All your unnameable connections float beneath me here. I am buoyed by the breaths of once living things, now exhaled as air but submerged in water. So forever hail to you, O sea, where the wild birds find their only rest. Born of the earth but nurtured by the sea, though hills and valleys gave me life, the billows are my true brothers. Chapter 117. The Whale Watch. The 4 whales killed that evening were spread out in different directions. One was far upwind, another was somewhat downwind, one was ahead, and the last one was behind. The last 3 were brought alongside the ship before night fell, but the upwind one couldn't be reached until morning. The boat that had killed it stayed beside it all night, and that boat belonged to Ahab. They had pushed a pole upright into the dead whale's spout hole, and a lantern hanging from the top cast a flickering light on the black, shiny back of the whale, and out onto the dark waves that gently lapped against its broadside, like soft surf on a beach. Ahab and his entire crew seemed to be asleep, except for the Parsee, who was crouched in the bow, watching the sharks that were circling the whale and tapping the light cedar planks with their tails. A sound like the moaning of ghosts echoed through the air, haunting and sorrowful, as if from the unforgiven souls of Gomorrah. Ahab was stirred from his sleep, and seeing the Parsee face to face, they seemed like the last 2 men in a flooded world, surrounded by darkness. "I've dreamed it again," Ahab said. "About the hearses? Didn't I tell you, old man, that you'll have neither hearse nor coffin? And who are the ones that get hearses when they die at sea? But I said, old man, that before you can die on this voyage, you must see 2 hearses on the sea. The first must not be made by human hands, and the wood of the last one must have grown in America." "Aye, aye, that would be a strange sight, Parsee, a hearse and its plumes floating over the ocean with the waves as pallbearers. Ha, we won't be seeing that any time soon. Believe it or not, you can't die until you see it, old man. And what was that saying about yourself? Even if it comes to the end, I will still go before you as your pilot. And when you go ahead of me, if that ever happens, then before I can follow, you still have to appear to me to guide me? Wasn't that the deal? Well, if I believe what you say, oh my pilot, I have 2 promises here. I will kill Moby Dick and survive." "Take another promise, old man," the Parsee replied, his eyes glowing like fireflies in the dark. "Only hemp can kill you." "You mean the gallows. Then I must be immortal on land and sea," Ahab exclaimed with a mocking laugh. "Immortal on land and sea." Both of them fell silent, as if they were one person. As dawn broke, the crew awoke from the bottom of the boat, and before noon, the dead whale was brought to the ship. Chapter 118. The Quadrant. The season for crossing the equator was finally approaching. Every day, when Ahab came out of his cabin and looked up, the attentive helmsman would prominently handle the wheel, and the eager sailors would rush to the rigging, their eyes fixed on the nailed doubloon, waiting impatiently for the order to steer the ship toward the equator. Eventually, the order came. It was just before noon, and Ahab, sitting in the bow of his boat, was about to take his usual daily measurement of the sun to determine his latitude. In the Japanese sea, summer days are like bursts of brilliant light. The bright Japanese sun feels like the blazing center of the ocean's vast, fiery mirror. The sky looks polished, there are no clouds, the horizon appears to float, and this overwhelming brightness is as intense as the splendor of God's throne. Luckily, Ahab's quadrant was equipped with colored lenses so he could view that solar blaze. He adjusted himself to the ship's roll and positioned his astrological instrument to his eye, waiting to catch the exact moment when the sun reached its highest point. While he was fully focused on this, the Parsee knelt below him on the deck, looking up at the same sun. His eyelids were half closed, and his wild face was subdued to an earthly calm. At last, Ahab took the desired reading, and with a pencil on his ivory leg, he quickly calculated his latitude at that exact moment. Then, lost in thought, he looked up at the sun and murmured to himself, "You sea mark, you mighty pilot. You tell me exactly where I am, but can you give me even the slightest hint about where I will be? Or can you tell me where something else is living right now? Where is Moby Dick? You must be seeing him at this very moment. My eyes are looking into the very eye that is currently watching him. Yes, and into the eye that is also looking at the unknown things beyond you, O sun." Then, gazing at his quadrant and fiddling with its various complicated settings, he reflected again and muttered, "Foolish toy, a child's plaything for arrogant admirals, commodores, and captains. The world brags about you, your cleverness, and your power. But what can you really do? You can only point out the poor, pitiful spot where you and the hand that holds you are on this vast planet. Nothing more. You cannot predict where even a drop of water or a grain of sand will be tomorrow at noon, and yet, with your limitations, you insult the sun. Science. Curse you, you vain toy, and cursed be all things that draw a man's eyes up to that heaven, whose bright light only scorches him, as my old eyes are scorched by your brightness, O sun. A man's eyes are naturally level with the earth's horizon. They are not meant to look up from the top of his head, as if God intended him to gaze at the sky. Curse you, Quadrant, he shouted, throwing it down to the deck. I will no longer navigate by you. The level ship's compass and the straightforward dead reckoning by log and line will guide me and show me my place on the sea. Yes, he said, jumping from the boat to the deck. This is how I trample on you, you insignificant thing that feebly points upward. This is how I smash and destroy you. As the frantic old man spoke and stomped with his feet, a sneering triumph that seemed directed at Ahab, and a sense of fatalistic despair that seemed to reflect his own feelings, crossed the silent, motionless Parsi's face. Unnoticed, he rose and slipped away, while the awed crew gathered together on the forecastle. Ahab, pacing the deck with a troubled demeanor, shouted, "To the braces! Up helm! Square in!" In an instant, the yards swung around, and as the ship tilted on its heel, her 3 tall, elegant masts stood proudly above her long, ribbed hull, resembling the 3 Horati dancing on one powerful horse. Standing between the knightheads, Starbuck watched the Pequod's chaotic course, as well as Ahab's as he stumbled along the deck. I have sat in front of a dense coal fire and watched it burn brightly, full of its tortured, flaming life, and I have seen it eventually fade away to nothing but dust. Old man of the oceans, of all this fiery life of yours, what will remain in the end but a small pile of ashes? Yes, Stubb replied, but sea coal ashes. Remember that, Mr. Starbuck. Sea coal, not your common charcoal. Well, I heard Ahab mumble. Someone has thrust these cards into my old hands. They swear I must play them, and no others. And damn me, Ahab, but you're right. Live for the game and die in it. Chapter 119. The Candles. The warmest climates can breed the fiercest dangers. The Bengal tiger hides in lush groves filled with spices. The brightest skies can hide the deadliest storms. Beautiful Cuba experiences tornadoes that never hit the tame northern lands. Similarly, in these brilliant Japanese seas, sailors face the most fearsome storm of all, the typhoon. It can suddenly burst from a clear sky like an exploding bomb hitting a dazed and sleepy town. By evening that day, the Pequod had lost her sails and was left to battle a typhoon that had struck her head-on. As night fell, the sky and sea roared and shook with thunder and flashed with lightning, revealing the damaged masts flapping in the wind, with the remnants of the storm's fury left behind for its aftermath. Holding onto a shroud, Starbuck stood on the quarter deck, glancing up at every flash of lightning to see what further damage had happened to the rigging, while Stubb and Flask directed the crew in securing the boats more tightly. But despite their efforts, it seemed in vain. Even though it had been lifted to the very top of the cranes, Ahab's windward quarterboat didn't escape. A massive rolling wave crashed against the ship's swaying side, smashed the boat's bottom at the stern, and left it leaking like a sieve. Bad news, Mr. Starbuck," Stubb said, looking at the wreck. "But the sea will do what it wants. I can't fight it. You see, Mr. Starbuck, a wave has a long run before it leaps. It travels all around the world before it springs up. But for me, my only run-up is right here across the deck. But never mind, it's all in fun, as the old song says. Oh, the wind is jolly, and the whale's a joker, waving his tail. Such a funny, playful, sporty lad is the ocean, oh. The scud is all flying, that's just his foamy splash, when he stirs the sea. Such a funny, playful, sporty lad is the ocean, oh. Thunder splits the ships, but he just smacks his lips tasting this storm. Such a funny, playful, sporty lad is the ocean, oh. Stop it, Stubb, cried Starbuck. Let the typhoon sing and play its tune in our rigging. But if you're a brave man, you'll be quiet. But I'm not a brave man. I never said I was. I'm a coward, and I sing to lift my spirits. And let me tell you, Mr. Starbuck, there's no way to stop me from singing except to cut my throat. And when that's done, I'll probably sing the doxology as a finale. Madman! Look through my eyes if you don't have any of your own. What? How can you see better on a dark night than anyone else, no matter how foolish? Here, shouted Starbuck, grabbing Stubb by the shoulder and pointing toward the weather bow. Don't you see the gale is coming from the east, the exact direction Ahab plans to sail to find Moby Dick? The same direction he swung toward at noon today? Now look at his boat. Where is it damaged? At the stern, where he usually stands. His spot is smashed. Now jump overboard and sing if you must. I don't quite understand you. What's in the wind? Yes, sailing around the Cape of Good Hope is the fastest way to Nantucket, Starbuck suddenly mused, ignoring Stubb's question. The gale that's hammering us now could turn into a fair wind that pushes us home. Over there, to the windward, all is darkness and doom, but to leeward, heading home, I see it brightening up over there, but not with lightning. Just then, in a moment of deep darkness following a flash, a voice came from his side. Almost at the same time, a boom of thunder rolled overhead. Who's there? Old Thunder, said Ahab, feeling his way along the ship's railing to his pivot hole, but suddenly finding his path illuminated by sharp flashes of lightning. Now, just like a lightning rod on land is meant to carry dangerous electricity into the ground, some ships carry rods at sea to direct lightning into the water. But because this conductor has to reach a significant depth to avoid contact with the ship's hull, and because it would face many risks if kept constantly dragging in the water, plus it would interfere with the rigging and slow down the ship, the lower parts of a ship's lightning rods are not always overboard. They are often made in long, thin links so they can be easily pulled up or dropped into the sea as needed. The rods! The rods! Shouted Starbuck to the crew, suddenly alerted by the bright lightning that had just lit up Ahab's way to his post. Are they overboard? Drop them overboard, fore and aft. Quick! Wait! Cried Ahab. Let's have a fair fight here, even if we're the weaker side. I'll help raise rods on the Himalayas and Andes so that everyone in the world can be safe, but forget about privileges. Just let them be. Look up! Shouted Starbuck. The corpusants! The corpusants! All the yardarms were tipped with a pale fire, and at each point where the lightning rods met the masts, 3 flickering white flames were visible, making each of the 3 tall masts silently glow in the sulphurous air, like 3 gigantic wax candles before an altar. Forget the boat! Let it go! Cried Stubb at that moment, as a crashing wave surged beneath his small craft, violently jamming his hand against the side as he tried to tie a lashing. Forget it! But as he slipped backward on the deck, he looked up and saw the flames, immediately changing his tone to say, May the corpusants have mercy on us all. For sailors, curses are just part of their everyday language. They'll swear during calm moments and while facing storms. They'll shout curses from the tops of the sails when they're teetering over a churning sea. But in all my journeys, I've rarely heard a single curse when God's fiery hand has touched the ship, when his mene, tekel upharsin has been woven into the rigging and ropes. While this pale light flickered above, the enchanted crew said little. They stood together on the forecastle, their eyes glowing in that ghostly phosphorescence, like a distant constellation of stars. Against the eerie light, the enormous black man Dagu looked 3 times his actual size and seemed like the dark cloud from which the thunder came. Tashtego's open mouth revealed his shark white teeth, which oddly glimmered as if they too had been touched by the flames. While illuminated by the unnatural light, Queequeg's tattoos burned like blue flames on his body. Eventually, the tableau faded with the pale light above, and once again the Pequod and all its crew were wrapped in darkness. A moment later, Starbuck pushed against someone while going forward. It was Stubb. What do you think now, man? I heard your cry. It didn't match the song. No, it didn't, Stubb replied. I said the corpusants have mercy on us all, and I hope they do. But do they only have mercy on those with long faces? Do they have no compassion for laughter? And look, Mr. Starbuck, but it's too dark to look. Listen to me. I take that masthead flame we saw as a sign of good luck. Those masts are rooted in a hold that's going to be packed with sperm oil, you see? So all that sperm will work its way up into the masts like sap in a tree. Yes, our 3 masts will one day be like 3 spermaceti candles. That's the good promise we saw. At that moment, Starbuck saw Stubb's face slowly coming into view. Looking up, he exclaimed, Look, look! Once again, the tall flames were visible, appearing even more supernatural in their brightness. The corpusants have mercy on us all, Stubb shouted again. At the base of the mainmast, just below the doubloon and the flame, the Parsee was kneeling in front of Ahab, but with his head turned away, while nearby, from the rigging, where they had just been securing a spar, several sailors, arrested by the glare, huddled together, dangling like a cluster of stunned wasps from a drooping tree branch. Others stood rooted to the deck in various enchanted positions, like the standing, stepping, or running skeletons in Herculaneum, but all with their eyes turned up. "Aye, aye, men!" Ahab called out. "Look up at it! Pay attention! The white flame only lights the way to the white whale. Hand me those links from the mainmast. I want to feel its pulse and let mine beat against it, blood against fire." So. Then turning, with the last link firmly in his left hand, he put his foot on the Parsee. With his eyes fixed upward and his right arm raised high, he stood before the towering flames. "Oh, you clear spirit of clear fire, whom I once worshipped on these seas as a Persian, until your flames burned me in a sacramental act, leaving me with a scar to this day. I now know you, clear spirit, and I realize that your true worship is defiance. You won't be kind to love or reverence. Even for hate, you can only kill, and all are killed. No fearless fool stands before you now. I acknowledge your speechless, placeless power, but until my last breath, I will dispute its unconditional, absolute control over me. In the midst of the impersonal, a personality stands here. Though I may be just a point, wherever I came from, wherever I go, while I live on this earth, this queenly personality lives within me, claiming her royal rights. But war is pain, and hate is suffering. Come to me in your lowest form of love, and I will kneel and kiss you. But at your highest, come as mere supernal power. And even if you launch navies filled with entire worlds, there's something in here that still remains indifferent. Oh, clear spirit, you made me of your fire, and like a true child of fire, I breathe it back to you." Sudden, repeated flashes of lightning, the 9 flames leap up to 3 times their previous height. Ahab, along with everyone else, closes his eyes, pressing his right hand against them. "I acknowledge your speechless, placeless power. Didn't I say that? It wasn't forced from me, and I won't drop these links. You can blind me, but I can still feel my way. You can consume me, but I can then become ashes. Take the homage of these poor eyes and shuttered hands. I wouldn't accept it. The lightning flashes through my skull, my eyeballs ache and ache, my whole battered brain feels like it's rolling on some stunning ground. Oh, yet blindfolded, I will still talk to you. Light as you are, you leap out of darkness. But I am darkness leaping out of light, leaping out of you. The javelins stop, open your eyes. See, or not, there burn the flames. Oh, you great one, now I take pride in my lineage. But you are just my fiery father. I don't know my sweet mother. Oh, cruel. What have you done with her? That's my puzzle, but yours is greater. You don't know how you came to be, hence you call yourself unbegotten. Certainly you don't know your beginning, so you call yourself unbegun. I know something about myself that you don't know about yourself, O omnipotent one. There's something beyond you, you clear spirit, for whom all your eternity is just time, and all your creativity is mechanical. Through you, your flaming self, my scorched eyes dimly see it. Oh, you foundling fire, you ancient hermit, you also have your unsolvable riddle, your unshared grief. Here again, with haughty agony, I read my ancestry. Leap, leap up and lick the sky. I leap with you, I burn with you. I would gladly be fused with you. Defiantly, I worship you. The boat! The boat! Cried Starbuck. Look at your boat, old man. Ahab's harpoon, the one forged at Perth's fire, remained tightly secured in its prominent place, extending beyond the bow of his whaleboat. But the sea that had smashed its bottom caused the loose leather sheath to fall off, and from the sharp steel barb, a pale forked flame now issued. As the silent harpoon burned there like a serpent's tongue, Starbuck grabbed Ahab by the arm. God is against you, old man. Stop. This is a bad voyage. Badly begun, badly continued. Let me adjust the sails while we still can, old man, and make it a fair wind homeward, to go on a better voyage than this. Hearing Starbuck, the terrified crew quickly ran to the braces, though no sails were left up. For a moment, all the aghast mates' thoughts seemed to be theirs. They raised a half-mutinous cry. But throwing the rattling lightning links to the deck and snatching the burning harpoon, Ahab waved it like a torch among them, swearing to pierce the first sailor who dared to untie a rope. Petrified by his appearance and even more frightened by the fiery dart he held, the men fell back in dismay, and Ahab spoke again. All your oaths to hunt the white whale are as binding as mine, and heart, soul, body, lungs, and life. Old Ahab is bound. And so you know the rhythm of this heart. Look here, I blow out the last fear. And with one breath, he extinguished the flame. Just as men flee from a lone, gigantic elm during a hurricane, its height and strength making it a target for lightning, many of the sailors ran from Ahab in terror at his last words. Chapter 120. The deck towards the end of the first night watch. Ahab stood by the helm and Starbuck approached him. We need to lower the main topsail yard, sir. The band is coming loose and the lee lift is half stranded. Should I bring it down, sir? Bring down nothing. Just tie it down. If I had skysail poles, I'd hoist them up right now. Sir. For God's sake, sir. Well, the anchors are coming loose, sir. Should I bring them inboard? Do nothing and change nothing, just lash everything down. The wind is picking up, but it hasn't reached my high ground yet. Hurry and take care of it. By the masts and keels. He thinks I'm the hunchbacked captain of some small coastal vessel. Bring down my main topsail yard. Oh, for heaven's sake. The tallest masts are meant for the wildest winds, and my mind is sailing among the clouds. Should I bring that down? Only cowards lower their sails during a storm. What a ruckus up there. I would almost call it beautiful if I didn't know that a stomach ache is a noisy affliction. Oh, take your medicine. Take your medicine.